my favorite songs are slow and sad. I don't know what's wrong with me.
Welcome to the Sad Song Queens podcast, where we dive deep into the songs that make us cry. I'm Laura Webb.
And I'm Lindsay Wolfington.
Today we'll be chatting with Patrick Watson and talking about the song by him and the Cinematic Orchestra, To Build a Home.
Patrick Watson is a Canadian singer-songwriter, film composer, and multi-instrumentalist known for his cinematic approach to music and distinctive ethereal voice. The Montreal native first gained international recognition with his band's 2006 album Close to Paradise, which won Canada's prestigious Polaris Music Prize.
To Build a Home is an iconic collaboration between the Cinematic Orchestra and Patrick Watson. Released as part of the 2007 album Ma Fleur, the song has since been featured over 500 times in all licensed media, which means trailers, ads, video games, TV, film, anything you can think of, it's been licensed in. For example, such shows like Grey's Anatomy, Orange is the New Black, One Tree Hill, Teen Wolf, This Is Us, Schitt's Creek, and so many more.
It is what we in the music supervision community call a sync darling. With over 652 million streams on Spotify, its universal themes and emotionally charged delivery make it a song that continues to resonate with audiences.
With over 2 decades of genre-defying work, Patrick Watson remains a unique voice in modern music who is known for crafting lush, haunting compositions. We are so excited to talk to him today.
First, we'll listen to Build a Home and then dive into our conversation. So grab those tissues and let's get into it, because we all need a good cry.
There is a house built out of stone, wooden floors, walls, and window sills, tables and chairs warmed by all of the dust. This is a place where I don't feel this is a place where I feel at home. By the cracks of his skin, I climbed to the top. I climbed the tree to see the world. When the gust came around to blow me down, held on as tightly as you held on me. Held on as tightly as you held on me.
So that song's all major chords except for one minor that's almost, it's all major chords. And almost, in fact, when you do the studying of all the songs that really make you cry, they are not minor chords, they're all major. Another good example is Adagio for strings. You know Adagio for strings? Where it's like da 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 da. The moment you cry is the biggest B major. B major is the brightest chord you can. It's like, for me personally, in my taste, B major is a very bright color, and that when he hits the B major is where you cry. So I feel like people are sad songs in the minor keys. I feel like that's a myth. I think minor chords make you close and feel dissonance, which makes you feel a certain type of dissonance. But there's different, like this kind of sadness is an optimistic sadness. It's not sad. It's a moment. It's a feeling of like letting things just do what they're supposed to do. Therefore, it's not really a sad story in the sense more than you're just letting something go. So it's not sad. I wouldn't classify it under like, there's no complaining inside. There's nothing saying the world is bad or that it's just a moment that things just happen and that's just what it is. You know, it's not really a sad story either. Like, I don't even know what the song's specific story is.
Well, that's
so
interesting.
Yeah, that's so interesting because, so one of the things we like to do is we kind of tell you our theory, and this is the genesis.
Let's do it. Start with your theory because it's more fun.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, because our genesis for this is that we're like, we'd love to just sit down and talk about these songs that mean so much to us. And that's the power of music, right? We take away our meaning for our job. Sometimes we're translating it to be like, okay, yeah, we can make this work for the scene. But okay, Lindsay, you go ahead with your theory. And then
I don't know that I had really thought about what it was about until we were preparing for this. And I was like, okay, I'm going to really listen to the lyrics. So I had kind of two theories. there is like a simplicity to it. Like, I'm like, wait, it's just saying, I'm building a home for you, for me, a place where you don't feel alone, which is kind of like the definition of home, right? I feel like it could mean the physical home, or it could just mean a place where you feel known. Okay, but then perhaps it just disappears and the home or you turn to dust. The imagery of the tree and climbing it and being blown around made me think that maybe this is also like, what happens when a natural disaster comes around and like uproots you. So all those roots you established in a home are just washed away in the wind or in the rain, which I'm like all those like, the faster piano moments when it's kind of like the piano's almost like having its own chorus, right? That momentum could feel like that kind of thing. And then the second meaning could just be simply that we spend our whole life building and putting down roots, but in the end, it's all just swept away. We get old, weaker, and, to dust we return. So that's my dreamy poetic.
Because I'm thinking about it. No, I'll let you both go, and then I'll tell you what I think, and then we'll see. We'll compare notes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how I top that because that's like poetic. I was like, damn, girl.
I know, say it, Laura. You're like, just do it.
Yeah,
I spilled my coffee.
I know.
And my coffee has disappeared.
I know,
like,
right?
Not that coffee.
I mean, I think like it's a metaphor for a relationship you built and the space that you built, and now maybe it's all gone. I said, I think, I mean, this we can talk into more about because it's been placed and synced, as we call it, so many times. But I think why it works so well is that it can be applied to so many relationships and situations. Yeah, I don't know. So yes,
I'll tell you the most beautiful story I've ever heard about the song as an intro to like what I think. Like it was so like at one point, I got this message from this mom in London who had 3 daughters, and their father had passed away really young, cancer. So they planted this tree in the backyard, and they would listen to that song around a tree that they planted in his memory. So, and I guess why I say that, like that, I think that's the most touching thing I've ever heard of someone's experience of the song. And then it came and they're really sweet, and it was very well. It's a very interesting moment, and it's also really interesting to be a part of people's lives in that way. It's a very intimate way. Like it's one thing. It's you know what I mean. I thought that was a moment where it really I was like affected me as like the person saying it. I'm like, I feel like I'm in your family, like
totally.
In that way. But I guess I think why I bring that up is I think it's like everything you're saying. I think it's all the above. I think when I listen to it, I don't think I know specifically what I'm singing about. I think it's an accumulation of many different moments in my life, and I feel like that. If I whatever I feel in that moment, it's an accumulation of so many different things that goes into that song. So I think that song's about so many different parts and so many different stories that I guess why people can connect to it is that it has that availability to connect it with because it is about a million different things. I think the tree thing for sure is about friendship. It's 100% because if you have a good friend, they give you like a perspective. Like above the other 4, it helps you see a perspective. When you climb a tree, you want to see all the trees, so it gives you a perspective everywhere. And even when you go up there, it blows really hard, but then you hold on to each other so you don't fall down from that perspective. So I definitely know that line is about that. I definitely know the stone house is about the houses built on Esplanade, but I also grew up in a stone house, and then I also think a lot of these lyrics, without me knowing it, were a lot about my house as a kid. And when I listen to it now, I think subconsciously that house looks like my house where I grew up. So I don't think I knew that when I wrote it. That's what I mean. Like I think when I listen to it, it feels like it's displaced sadness from the lyrics I'm singing itself, but coming completely without making the attachment while I was saying the words. And that's why I think it belongs to all the categories.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about writing the song and working with Cinematic Orchestra to do that.
Oh, yeah, it's such a funny story. I mean, you're going to start laughing. The story is as absurd as you can possibly get. So,
all right, let's do it.
Yeah.
So I live in Canada, right? So everybody plays hockey. Like, this is how absurd the story is.
Oh, my God. Oh, I love that it's starting like this. Okay.
So I'm like a goalie in hockey, and Ninja Tune, which is a label, has like its hockey team. And Jeff is this really wonderful guy who runs Ninja Tune. He's like, in the music business, they say there's like drug dealers and music lovers. It's like one of the two. He's like the music lover, you know what I mean? And really nerdy, like, and really good guy. And he's their coach. And I played this really great game as a goalie because he's really into his team. He's like, listen, you played a great game. I know a Cinematic Orchestra is looking for a singer for this song. And I'm like, oh, you can put my name. So that's how ridiculous it is. So anyways, they send me this like house, like it was like electronic, it was like a dance song. And it had this like really wonderful bass line that Phil, the bass player of Cinematic Orchestra, came up with. He's not very, although Jay's an integral part as well, but I do think Phil never gets enough love for that because the bass line really is somewhat the big counter melody to my melody, And anyways, and then, so I heard it. And then when I heard it, I was like, oh, I just know what to do with this. I didn't know why, but I just knew, I just heard a melody immediately as if it belonged on the chords. So then they came, and I thought we were making an electronic piece of music, but we started piano and voice. And so I started writing all these like choruses and all these parts to it, thinking that I would give them as a groundwork to make this like kind of an acid jazzy or whatever you want to call it back then, some more like remixed version of it. So I built this whole piano demo. And then, like I said, there's all these spaces. Like I would never had the guts to leave that much quiet at that age.
Well, it's part of the beauty of the song, I think, too.
Yeah, it's an argument that I think that young people, the big difference in the music business now in the old days is that labels would enforce a producer on a lot of the projects. And although that we may think that's only for commercial reasons, I would argue that it's like having a shrink in a sense where you don't necessarily make the best decisions, or you're not necessarily 100% aware as you think you are to some degree. And there's a lot of examples of songs I would have never released without outside influence being like, you should just release that. I'm like, I think it's pretty ridiculous. To Build a Home, I thought it was ridiculous when I heard it. I was like, it's too long, it's too quiet. No one can listen to this. I can't even listen to this.
You're tough, man.
I know.
No, but I just don't think you can have, I think that kind of, I think it would be embarrassing to be that, not embarrassing, but I think it would be, coming from a music point of view, it's a very vulnerable vocal take. Like, let's be honest, like it's very long, it's very demanding of a listener. So you don't, I think at that age you feel a little bit, you're like, oh, I don't really want to put someone through 4.5 minutes of my melancholy. At that age you'd be shy to do that. And I feel like having Jason and Dom, Dom was there. They're like, no, it's another good friend. But I mean, Dom and Jason were like, no, it's really good like that. And I'm like, you guys are crazy. Like, no one's going to listen to this.
But see how wrong you are. Like
100%. That's why. I would argue that a producer is not necessarily just to sell records. It's really to like, it's to be that outside ear that you can't hear for yourself.
Right.
I feel like that's. I feel like if I would have had better access to good producers younger for a lot more of my music, I think my music would have been a lot better. To be honest, in hindsight.
I think you're doing okay.
Yeah, but if I listen to the younger records, like because we were just producing it ourselves, and we didn't really, I didn't have anybody I could do it with, or I couldn't find someone that it worked with, and we had help from some people that were really helpful, like Jace from Besno Lakes did some producing, but I never had that person, tell me how to write a song, So I feel like when I listen to my songs, I'm like, damn, I would have liked to know, if I would have had an outside ear, I feel like my songs would have been a lot better when I was younger, in hindsight.
And I think a lot of that space that you take is what makes it so cinematic and like so ripe for placement, is because it's almost like score, right? Like it takes its pauses with, quote unquote, a scene. It leaves space for dialogue, essentially, which is something we always need in music. And then it also has such momentum with the piano part.
Yeah, well, you have to remember how funny this thing is for me. So let's go back to that time in the music business, right?
Right. Okay.
And that time in the music business.
How old were you? How old were you when you wrote this?
I was in my mid-20s.
Okay.
When I wrote that.
Okay.
But like in that time, the music business, like my music was like no label on earth was interested in my music. Like I was no radio songs. Right? It was in the radio period, right? And it was like that song was kind of recorded right before like Syncs became like right at that transition where Syncs became the new radio hit, right? So all these labels were like, your music's ridiculous. It can't play on the radio. And I was like, okay. And then this song became, and then thanks to a lot of the supervisors, to be honest, they found a home for the type of music I make, which is absolutely cinematic. So the joke was that the music business became more visual music connected than just music. And it kind of was really good for an artist like me who was naturally like that, So it's a bit funny when you go back to that time and period.
I worked in radio in the late 90s, early 2000s, and left and transitioned into music supervision. And I was like, oh, this makes a lot more sense for me, because I love a great pop song or a radio hit, but like my favorite songs are never the single, right? Like take me to track 11, like, find me the ballad. And that's usually what ends up working really well in TV and film. So yeah, I agree when you're like, it would be crazy if you were trying to make this a radio single, but if you're just trying to make a great piece of music, then whatever works.
Yeah, no, I guess that's just the funniness of that song and the timing of that song. And yeah, I find it such an interesting coincidences that made that song happen. I find it kind of funny that it's built out of so many coincidences.
Totally.
Right.
Well, and I'm actually what happened to the dance track version of it? Is there like an alt demo out there that's for the club?
Do I still I wonder in my emails, like, would I be able to send the original? Yeah, I just had like a bit of a 4/4 vibe with the bass line.
But like, so did they ever combine the two, like this version over?
No, I think it's just what I think about that performance is it makes me think of like when I was a kid, like at night, I'd just improvise and play piano and be very too dramatic. And
love it.
Like so like embarrassing.
We have a special club. That's why we all find each other. Yeah, we love the drama.
I was like as a teenager, I was pretty emo. If I listened to the songs, like they were like, they're so unbearably emo that like, like To Build a Home's emo, but let me tell you, there's another emo.
I'm like, we need those songs stat.
Yeah.
I have this one recording, like it's funny because so I used to just play piano at night, like till 3 a.m. and just sing ridiculous, crazy songs and just improvise and then whatever, just sing like that kind of crazy shit and do that kind of piano, whatever. And then but I was always convinced that when I was playing as a kid, I was like, wasn't me playing, it was like somebody else. I always used to think that. So then I like recorded all those like songs he played as a kid when I was 18, when my parents moved out of the house. And then I listened back to tape, and then I'm doing this kind of improvs that I guess were first versions of To Build a Home in a way that they were too heavy-handed, too emo, not musical enough. Like I just didn't know how to do that, So I feel like To Build a Home comes from that. But when I did listen to that recording, there's this part where I go into this Irish jig and say, haha, my name is Gordon. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. And then I asked my mom, I'm like, who's Gordon? And they're like, your grandfather's his brother was Gordon. He died really young of polio. And he split.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, oh, God. I just think that like, it doesn't matter what's real or not. Honestly, like I'm not going to say that that's real or not. Like it's ridiculous, but I think that it's a universe that my headspace was living in. So whether it was like real or not, I do think as a kid, like I fundamentally believe that, and I don't really care whether it's real. I'd say it doesn't really matter to some degree. Do you know what I mean though? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I mean, okay, we're going there a little bit, but like, Laura and I love like knowing our signs and like our moon and rising or whatever. I constantly forget what they mean and whatnot, but we feel like there are signs out there sometimes from loved ones who have passed away. Like it doesn't have to be like woo woo. It also like gives meaning to your life, right? So like just lean into it.
Yeah. Who's to say what's real and not? How do we know?
Well, I think the one thing I think it's really interesting in the specific time that we're in right now is that like we're building these like really incredible tools that are incredibly powerful, right? And a lot of them, like math guys, when we talk about the reality we live in, most of them make the argument for some sort of kind of like thing that it's a very flexible reality. Like it's probably, I don't know why it's a projected universe. Like it's like not in a philosophical way. They're like, it's 2-dimensional surface and everything you see is projected. It's not really tangibly there because of the quantum stuff, right? And I do think that there's going to be a moment where as AI gets stronger, when you start really understanding how the universe really works, I do think there might be surprises there that might be interesting and that might really change how we saw everything. You know, I think that's still in the cards of possibilities. And
That's so
I don't
interesting.
know.
Connecting the like technology part of things to the intangible feels like the opposite spectrum, right? But you're right. That's an amazing thought, I think.
Quantum mechanics is like the weirdest thing on Earth, right? There's nothing weirder than it.
I don't really know anything about quantum mechanics,
well,
so I won't.
Quantum mechanics is just describing how the small universe works. And whenever they talk about how the small universe works, it doesn't really make sense in a practical way that we want it to. I mean, maybe that's the most simplest way of putting it, that in a way that it might be a little bit weirder than you think. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
I believe that.
All the math, that's what the math looks like. So who knows? And now most of our world is being made out of math. So as you connect all these dots, you're like, uh-oh. Like, so when you talk about superstitions and you add these like structures of belief around you, I think it's hard to say how much will that like belief in these structures have some effect or not. I think that will be up to debate in a way that, do you know what I mean? It's not whether they're real or not. It's just that maybe that belief system does have some sort of impact on your surrounding experience. Back to sad songs, I find it really interesting when you listen to composers who are religious composers. Let's say, my favorite example being Arvo Part. Do you know Arvo Part?
Yep.
Do you know what we're talking about? Yeah, and he's a very spiritual person. In fact, like he looked at grass movement for 10. He stopped music. He studied like atonal music and stopped, and then studied grass movement for like 10 years, and then went back and wrote, I think, in my personal like taste, some of the most beautiful music in the 20th century. 100%. It's the most like spiritual thing I've ever heard. I can't think of a more spiritual music than Arvo Part. Like Fratres is like a mind blow. But I always think that maybe if you're writing in the context where it's not about you, it's about something so great that you allow yourself to make something so great, because it's not in the shape of you and you're limited. You're just like a small speck of dust to some degree. And when you allow yourself to be a speck of dust and then write inspired by this giant structure, maybe you allow yourself to write something better because you're not holding yourself back. And I often think about that sometimes.
Well, this kind of goes into your talking about like, is the genius the songwriter, or is the writer a conduit for something bigger?
Well, I'll give you another story that argues 100%. Colin Stetson, who I think is probably the best, one of the best contemporary musicians on the planet. His live shows, if you ever get a chance to see him live, he's just solo, like bass sax and bass clarinet. There was nothing crazier. I've never seen a crazier concert, and I've seen a lot of concerts. It's more crazier than my shows I saw of Neil Young. Like, it's so out and so powerful. Anyways, he argues 100% against me. He's like 100% disagree with me. Yeah, he was like, no, it's 100% from him. Okay. And he's not a conduit, and he makes every decision. And, so that would be an argument against it from a very talented musician. So doesn't mean, I don't know, so I might be totally wrong.
Well, it probably depends on who the person is too, right? Like that makes a lot of sense too. For him, it's one way, and for you, it might be another.
Totally.
Yeah. And life events, things that happen to you. I think sometimes that helps you zoom out too. Sometimes maybe when we're younger, we think we're the center of the universe. I feel like a lot of us youth. And then as life happens to you, right, you zoom out and you're like, we have zero control over anything in life, right?
Well, yeah, to build a home, I just made me think, like, I forgot about one important part. So when we wrote the song, Jason had brought a script because he wanted to shoot a movie, and it was about a milk farmer and the farm drowns in milk, which is totally crazy. So
did they write this script, or this was somebody?
Yeah, they wrote the script. Oh. So when I guess like that thing, It Disappear, originally was intended for an old couple who had lived together and they were losing their lives. So that definitely would have been a seed. I think I wrote it in hindsight, for my mom. That's what I think. I think that's a piece, and not in a way that that's when I listen to it now, that I feel like I'm responding to that more than, like, emotionally more than anything. I feel like now when I listen to that tone of the voice, I'm like, I must be thinking about that, because I don't actually know,
And what about your mom? Just like how much she loved
just
you?
Like just our experience as a kid. Like she's had like a really tough time at one point, and she just was no longer there in some ways. In some ways, she was absolutely there, like a great mom, but she like fell very mentally ill at one point, slowly out of pressure. Anyways, whatever. Not to make it a big story, but then a moment of her disappeared at that point. So I still think that Disappear line, I can't think of anything else would have been. I can't imagine not being a bit of that.
Yeah.
In hindsight, but I don't think you know this when you write songs, and I don't think it matters because I think that what makes a song great is the fact that each person can make their own story with it.
Right. But
well, just out of curiosity, is that where the minor chord appears on Disappear?
No, the minor chord appears on the most nicest moment. It's like the minor chord I actually use this as a place you feel at home. It's the B minor. It's literally D major, A sus to E major, bright chords, and then this is a place. That's the only minor chord in the entire thing. And then there's one minor chord in the whole. Right before the major is like, and then there's another big minor, which that's the only. That's the only two minor chords in the entire thing.
Well, I mean, I think your vocal performance, you feel the sadness. So that makes sense that you're thinking of your mother at a time when she was maybe here, but physically not there, right? Like
that's what I mean. I think the only thing, there's a certain depth to it that you can't. Songs are strange, they have a certain depth to it that you don't. That when you have some people with interesting experiences in life, they bring really different types of depths, and depths is not necessarily the worst tragedies because you can get lots of different types of depths and lots of different types of situations. I do find that people who have had the hardest lives write really good happy songs. Like when you look at like the soul singers who probably had the most, or like if you listen to jazz, or like the people who had the most like difficult journey, it seems to be that they are the ones who have enough depth to write like uplifting music.
And like comedians.
And that's a weird,
right?
maybe that's not a popular opinion, but just in a way that they're like, dude, I know that I don't need to be there. I need to be somewhere else. And like look at Nina Simone. Like Nina Simone's music sounds like the most joyous thing I can think of.
But she also writes some real sad ones too.
Yeah, but it's all up tempo. It's not. It's never really down tempo. It's very uplifting. It's incredible. That's what makes it so wonderful. It's not. That's its power. It's a very powerful. So I sometimes think that really emo music is. This is just not what I think, but I'm just going to say possibilities of realities. But maybe people who write really emo music are the people with the least amount of experience with true sadness. That's so you shouldn't say that.
No,
I'm not saying it is that. I'm just saying that maybe because when you look through the music and you look at these pieces that were written by the people like Michael Jackson, it's examples of a very troubled person,
right?
The very difficult childhood, writing the happiest damn dance music. James,
right?
All these people, when you look at these people, like the saddest music was Chet Baker. But I'm not entirely sure he had I don't know, but you know what I mean?
No, and I would say Laura and I are generally happy people, but we love our sad songs. So maybe that's just like our outlet,
Yeah.
Of feeling something different.
I mean, here's another thing I think about sometimes for fun, not just to have a fun think about things, is that, music releases all sorts of these different feelings inside you and chemicals, and different experiences. And melancholy is like, I would say To Other Home falls more into melancholy than sadness, personally.
Yes, agree.
Melancholy is like a drug. I mean, it's a drug like any other. And it's I don't think a sad song has more depth than necessarily a dance song. I feel like they just give you different experiences like vegetables and fruits. And it's not that one's better than the other. They're just very different vitamins that you need in different times of your day, And often when I hear people talk about musical taste in a way that like their taste is superior, I'm always like, if someone listens to heavy metal, it's because their body needs heavy metal. Like, if you have an opinion about that, it's an absurdity because that's what they need. They need that to feel that. Like it's not about a taste or better taste or worse taste. It's about what you need to get through the day,
I love that analogy. That is wonderful. Yeah, I think that's right. At different times, we need different things, right? And our diet.
And different people need different things. Some people need different things to get through the day. Music helps just get through the day. That's its job.
Agreed.
Ultimately, that's what we do.
Yeah.
So I'm like, so what kind of music is chocolate? Because that's probably
it's probably melancholy.
Yeah,
melancholy is probably the closest thing to chocolate, I would say.
Right.
Yeah,
I
mean, look at Je te laisse mo. It's like it's a piece of chocolate. It's not. I don't think it has more depth than, let's say, Party Fairy Rides to Party by the Beastie Boys. Maybe that's more deep than that song. And maybe some people will say because it's quiet, it's more deep, but it's not. It's not more deep. You know what I mean? It's just a different thing you need at that time. It's just a difference.
Right.
Totally.
No, that's so cool. So what is your diet like? Or
I will listen to one thing for like 6 months.
oh, really?
I,
Oh,
will-
you're one of
I
those.
cannot.
Okay.
I'm one of that. Like, and the
Yeah.
last thing I listened to that really blew my mind was Ryuichi Sakamoto's last record called Opus.
Oh.
It's just piano. It's pretty hard for me to listen to just piano
Uh-huh.
because I'm a little bit judgy about it.
I
But
bet.
that is, yeah, but not in a way like, just in a way that like it doesn't do anything for me. You know, like I'm like, oh, that's. But that album is one of the prettiest. I mean, I've really fallen in love with. There's something about Japanese pianists I find really particular is that they use a lot of really colorful chords that can sound really like elevator music in the wrong context. But when they do it, there's this profoundness to it that I find really unique to Japanese composers.
Would you say
I mean, I generally
you're
like
mostly
classical music.
I was just going to ask. Yeah, I was like, would you
Yeah,
say you're
100%.
mostly okay? And is that were you classically trained pianist, or are you?
Yeah, I didn't like it when I was a kid though, as much as I do now. I mean,
Uh-huh.
the other record I really liked was a record by. This would be great for supervisors.
Oh,
So it's called
okay.
Orange. It's
Uh-huh.
called Orange by Carolyn Shaw. If I was like going to hire someone to score my film, that's who I'd hire,
Wow.
which is like her or Colin, to be honest. Those are the two composers I would pick. That it's just string quartet, and what's really remarkable about it is it's got pretty, let's say, complex chord progressions and complex movements, but you feel it like pop music. Where like the opposite would be like neoclassical, where it's like really simple things that have a little bit of tone of classical, but it's actually pop music. It's like the inverse of that. It has all the complexity of pop music, but still is as touching. And you're like, huh, that's hard to do. And yeah, it's a string quartet record, but in the quartet are like a bit like the modern Kronos quartet.
Right.
They're on Billie Eilish's record. They're called the Taka Quartet. And those guys are like, they're so, like they have such an interesting sound when they play strings. So I highly suggest that record. It'd be my, like, you'll see how beautiful it is. It's be great music on images, but I check it out.
Very amazing. Cool.
Yeah, I was impressed by that. I was impressed by Billy's finding of that, to be honest.
It's beautiful.
I feel like piano is your signature. And the way you have a lot of but like instead of just like chord, there's a lot of movement in your piano playing. And I just thought maybe you could talk a little bit about why you do what you do.
Can I do like a super nerdy fun answer?
Yes, please.
So obviously it definitely comes from like, let's say, Steve Reich and Philip Glass, but probably a lot more from Michael Nyman when I was a kid. Fun story to make it fun so I went to Bali to study gamelan, right? And one of the things people don't credit properly in the 20th century is minimalism, in that Steve Reich and Philip Glass does have some very important ties to gamelan music, which is exactly that. All these subdivision polyrhythms that just put you in a trance in one chord. And I've heard stories that in the early 20s, there was recordings of the gamelan music that were the main inspiration behind the minimalist and that kind of repetitive, rhythmic kind of thinking as part of in the neoclassical world, obviously not in the jazz world, but from that part of the world, there's an element of that music that found its way into the 20th century without credit. And I find it kind of interesting.
So what is gamelan music?
The gamelan music is Balinese music, but it's it's the loudest music on earth.
It's Balinese loud music.
You could have like 6 heavy metal bands in front of you, and it's still quieter than gamelan. It's like 25 people who are banging metal as loud as they can, and you're all groups of 2s. And if you play the downbeat, the other person plays the upbeat.
Okay.
So if you get like a melody like da 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 da, so what means like one guy's on the da, but there's another guy immediately in the da 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 da. It's always, but it's another person.
That's cool.
So the whole thing just like moves, and it's meant so you can hear like a town away, like for kilometers. And I studied gamelan with this guy who had they had one of the bass instruments was a car with bamboos in it to be the bass instrument.
Wow.
And it's just like incredibly crazy music and so psychedelic and incredible. So I guess I always find that an untold story of different elements that went into the 20th century that people don't really talk about.
Yeah, no, that's great. So what do you feel like your biggest takeaway from when you studied there? Like what in like patterning and pace, do you feel like that?
Oh, it's just there's a really specific way the pocket sits. You know what I mean? But I mean, I don't know how much I took from it depending on music, but I definitely we would do things where we'd take the melodies and we'd have to put it to gamelan. So like having them down and someone on the upbeat and organize your melodies like that. But they would have like a group of 20 kids, like young kids, and you'd be like, play them a melody. And then they would just gamelan it, like as if it was like a plug, and you're like, and they would all like subdivide the beats and make this like, it's so cool.
Wow.
It's really cool music.
That's
So anyways,
amazing.
that was a nerdy, back to some nerdy stuff for you guys.
No,
Have
I feel like I didn't know this about you.
No.
That's
Have you
awesome.
gone anywhere else and studied? I just feel like your music, you draw from so many different places. So that makes sense.
I would say that one of the countries with the most influence outside of, definitely France from Debussy and Satie. I think Satie is another really interesting character that did not get the 20th century credit, because he's like he played modal chords in 1879. Like that's like 100 years ahead of his time. He's the only composer in history that you could have written one of his pieces 100 years later and no one would know. And it completely sounds contemporary, and like you wouldn't even be able to know that was written in the 1800s versus Chopin right away, or like, so but the other thing interesting about him, he's like a really crazy intellectual, right? So he's another one of the people that inspired a lot of the first electronic music makers.
Really?
He wrote the first ambient album.
Oh.
It's called Music for Furniture. And it was meant, so the audience walks in the room, and he's like, I don't want anybody to sit down. I just want you to wander around, because like I just want my music to be kind of like the furniture on the walls. So they used the first. That's still like another 100 years ahead of before ambient music was even an idea.
Wow.
So intellectually, he came up with a lot of ideas that I think had a big impact in the 20th century that people don't really. It's hard to quantitate how much the effect had on the 20th century music.
Right.
I think Patrick,
Anyways,
I want you to teach us like all about classical composers. Like, can you teach this class? Like, I need this master class.
The only thing I would take away is that, or idea of classical music is very like gentlemen in a tuxedo,
right?
And they're 100% all degenerates, clearly, and you just don't write that kind of music without being a degenerate, like to some degree. And so, like, often I'll go to like an orchestra, and they're going to tell me how Debussy wants to be heard his music. Meanwhile, they have these like 1,000-volt like bright lights where all that music was played in candlelight originally, or lamps.
Oh, right.
Which is 100% a different. So already they're arguing that the lights are not bright enough on stage to read their music, which is like the biggest disservice to the music, because none of that music was performed under that extreme sunlight. It's absurd to feel romantic underneath the sun, like the way it is.
Right.
So I find often they're very arrogant about the interpretation of what the composers wanted or what they think. And I find them very arrogant about that. So I think everybody's way when they think about classical music is ruined by those people, because you're not really looking at it from a human point of view. You have to look at classical music like, if you hear Chopin, what you're hearing is that's how sad used to feel.
Right.
You're like, oh, like when music's like a museum of different feelings of different times. Like you can't subtract it from, like, if you felt melancholic at that time, that's how it felt. It's like a museum of memory of emotions.
Ask your question again.
Well, it's because to put things in context, both our parents were pilots, and pilots seem to be very superstitious about the sky and are a little bit more imaginative about and creative about. I think a lot of pilots always talk about aliens. Like, they're just very superstitious about the sky, which I find. I asked if your dad was as superstitious as my dad.
He was. And like, even until, so I lost him almost 2 years ago, and he had Alzheimer's, but even with Alzheimer's, everything, he would, and before obviously, but every day, and I'm looking at the sky right now, but he'd just be like, it's a great day for flying. And, like, he'd make sure and remark on it every day that it was. And he was actually in this, he was getting his master's in astrophysics to get in the space program, because he always wanted, the next frontier. And they shut the program down, so he never got to go. But so your dad was too?
Yeah, that's the reason why I tied to music, is that he would tell me that I shouldn't live in the city because it was interfering with what should be capturing from the sky to make music. And he thought that ideally I should be living in the woods, so there'd be the least amount of interference to hear the music that comes from the sky.
Oh, wow.
And then he was like very straight in other ways. He was a very strange, bizarre mix of like very like all like that kind of crazy idea, and then super conservative in other ways, like a real mix of the two. I always find it kind of funny.
That's really fascinating. And I haven't heard, I mean, I guess that makes sense. And obviously with you being a musician, but the music of the sky, that sounds lovely.
That's what I was going to say. I was like, what is the music of the sky?
What is it? Yeah.
Well, I think there's like two schools of thinking like about composition is a composition belong to the musician, or is he like somewhat of an antenna?
Right.
Do you know, I only make let's say, like, I don't really know which one it is, but let's make the argument for the antenna. Like, I remember going to like a Paul Simon show, and because we're talking about sad songs, we're talking about the Bridge Over Troubled Water.
Yeah.
And the way he describes a song in terms of his personal responsibility for it, it feels like it doesn't belong to him in a way. The way I understood the way he was talking about it, and it's kind of song that's like in a way, it's hard to explain. And the reason why I bring it up is because sometimes I feel like a song like To Build a Home, or songs that captured people's imagination in very extreme ways. I don't necessarily think it's because they're better piece of music. There's something about them that like you just caught something strange at the right time, and I kind of half believe that. And I feel like you catch songs more than you write them. That's why I brought up the pilots, and it comes because I guess that comes from my dad's idea, but I kind of believe in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that imagery too of just the music of the sky, and I don't know. That's really beautiful. Yeah.
Well, I guess like if you were to make that argument, you make the argument that music's like a really good antenna. So he has a lot of like different language skills to interpret what he captures, and that would be where the quality of the musician would come from. But that would also mean that he'd be a very good listener.
Right.
Which I always kind of believes fundamentally the best, like a musician is to some degree the best listeners. Maybe not to people talking, but they're listening to something.
Yeah, to what's out there in the air. Yes, or in the sky.
Or you're gleaning stuff from conversations and saying, "Oh, this will be good in a song," right?
Oh, we listen to something. I just don't know what we listen to. But
right. So what's the weather like in Montreal right now?
It's like rainy, cloudy November. Yeah, weather's. I think seasons are like a really underappreciated value to them, in a sense where, like the last version of me is starting to die because it's winter. And then you like cocoon and then go read a bunch of stuff. And then in the spring, you kind of are always a new version of yourself because of the extreme weather. And I think it's actually really helpful from an artist point of view, because you kind of always kill what you were last year, almost every year. You never come back the same.
That's a cool way to look at it.
Do you find that you write more in the winter or like a certain season?
I mean, fall's depends. I don't actually know. I mean, August is the hardest time to write for me. That's a 1 month. That's what I do now, just because I just never get anything good in August. It's just useless.
Maybe that's why everyone goes on holiday for August. Like we should just adopt the European way.
I'm all for it.
September's a really good writing month.
Okay.
Sometimes the dead of summer can be really beautiful, and sometimes the dead of winter. I don't think I think they're all just really different. Oh yeah, but my last thought and last thing we were talking about classical music's density. Because they needed like an opera singer, she can't whisper or nobody hears her, so to have the same emotion. So I would say that Billie Eilish is probably the most interesting example in a way that now it's almost at the point where it's ASMR. Her vocals like an ASMR instead of a vocal.
Yeah.
And which would mean that like, because you can make soft things louder, you need less complexity in the chord changes and melodies, because you have so much effect from the proximity of it, where if you were like 100 feet away, nobody would care if you sang that in opera days. Like, you just wouldn't hear it.
Right.
So I also find that proximity a really funny thing, and it just feels like the more technology gets advanced, the more ASMR things become. And not just, I'm using it as a bigger thing, but even like video wise, like everything's intimate and crazy. And more intimate. So it's a funny thing. That's what I was.
Right.
That's the difference between classical music and pop music. It's the amplification.
That makes a lot of sense.
That's a cool thought. Yeah.
I like that.
ASMR, it's so true. Like her whisper singing was like, you can hear the cracks in her voice and all that stuff. It's cool.
The whole volume is a really interesting thing, because like, in the 90s, we tried to make our albums so loud, like the louder, the better. You spend $1,000 in mastering and stuff. So yeah, so I had this vocal all by itself. And funny enough, that was after the first time I injured my voice on tour, where I had lost, because I was touring a lot, right? So I used to have this obscene top end that was not, funny enough, so I lost that top end because this big show, they gave me the cortisone for the voice, and it was like a big festival for 100,000 people. And I sang like I was Freddie Mercury with like my fist in the air, because that's steroids.
Oh my gosh.
And then I had totally like busted out half my cord that show. It came back, but it's just like the acrobatic top end that I used to have To Build a Home, I can still sing. It's like higher
I
than
was
that.
gonna
It's like the
ask.
crazy.
Yeah, because that's so high.
Yeah, it's pretty high. I used to be able to go to like E or F, and To Build a Home is like highest notes about A-ish, D or C, whatever, something like that. That I can still do. But so, anyways, I got this Leonard Cohen gig at the time, and I got to mute that arrangement, just hear his voice, and then I learned everything about singing in that one moment, because even without the little melody he was singing, with a little of, like, let's say, virtuosic singing, everything was just passing through just what it needed to do, and it taught me how to sing words and not melodies. And then I got much more compliments on my voice live after that than I did before that.
Wow.
Wait, so you basically learned to use your voice in a different way?
I just learned to sing the words and stop trying to be a singer.
Oh, right. So like trying less.
Well, it's just that if you do something acrobatic, my philosophy is that you can't help it, because you feel so emotionally overwhelmed that you need to sing those notes. And if you don't, you shouldn't sing them.
So how did your I'm like, how did you after your vocal cords hemorrhaged? I mean, did you have to have a surgery, or how does that repair?
No, it's
Does
like
it just
what it is means a
repairs?
blood vessel broke. It's pretty
Oh,
random.
wow.
It's not random
Oh.
because I've lived a crazy life, but it's half random. You know what I did? So I like science journals a lot, and like Radio Lab and all that kind of stuff. Like I just really enjoy. I just really enjoy those things, and I'd read a lot about those the hyperbaric chambers, which is like under pressure oxygen. So the doctors didn't really think I was ever going to sing again, and then
Oh my God.
I was like, oh, I'll just try some stuff for fun anyways, because I've always read so many articles about different things, and that one seemed to always heal scar tissue quickly. And since it was a hemorrhage on a thin piece of skin, I was like, oh, I might as well try that. But I could, after the first one, I could start making a noise. And I only started noticing when I went jogging because I jog a lot. I was like jogging way faster than I normally can. I was like, oh, bizarre, because I thought it didn't do anything, and I was never going to go back because I was terrified. And then the next morning I woke up, was the first time I could hear a sound out of my throat.
Wow. Could you not talk at all? You couldn't even talk?
Just air.
Wow.
I had like an app to talk to my kids. Like, go
Oh
clean
my
your
God.
room. I'm going to kill you.
That seems so terrifying.
Yeah, your voice is one of your key instruments. Like,
I think
to
the
have
terrifying part was, I feel like a lot of people depend on my voice to make a living in my team and just like the people around me. And I also feel that the way people know me is through that. So there's an incredible like feeling bad that you'd be letting people down. I think that would have been the hardest part of it. More than for me. I mean, I've sang for 45 years or whatever. I've been singing since I was a kid. And the pressure of it's kind of interesting. So there's parts of not having that pressure that would be interesting. So I kind of hung on to that. I would just do film composition, which gives me great joy. So there was aspects of that where I was at peace with it for myself. But it was very difficult to get over the responsibility that how many people would be let down by it. I thought that was challenging. And I also, the only time I really missed singing during that period for reals, I was at my friend's little bar gig, and there's like 10 people there. And those are my favorite gigs. And that was a moment where I felt really upset not to be able to sing. I was like, I just want to go sing some crazy shit to these 10 people, and that would have been really fun. That was the moment I was most upset about musically.
But what about like just communicating? Yeah, like with your kids and things. Like, wasn't that so hard?
I don't know if you noticed, but I talk too much. Like,
so they were like, "Oh, this is delightfully quiet in here."
So I think people like me better.
Never.
That song with Nova. That song with Nova there's literally a lyric I think in it saying, "I think they like me better since I lost my voice." And I think it was a pretty interesting. I'm pretty hyperactive, as you can tell, and sometimes I fill a void out of discomfort instead of out of the right reasons to fill the void. You know, and I definitely think I'm someone like that. So I thought it was pretty therapeutic to shut up. I was like,
it was
this
like
is great.
your version of like how people go to the Buddhist retreats and take the vow of silence and all that. This was your spiritual awakening?
Well, what I realize is that there's a lot of things we say that we think we're saying for the other person's benefit, but you just want to hear yourself say it. And I think the percentage of that is much higher than people would feel comfortable with in terms of the information the other person really wants to receive. And so you'll like want to say something in the conversation, and then you don't, and then you're like, nobody fucking wanted to hear that anyway, so who cares? Like, nobody really wanted that piece of information. So what have you really lost here? Like, and I thought all those kind of conversations inside myself were interesting. I thought it was an interesting experience.
Yeah,
I'm so glad
your voice came back. I mean, I've lost my
Are
like
you?
laryngitis, lost my voice.
Yeah, of course we are.
Yeah.
Because we get to have this conversation and we get to have your beautiful music. And
Well,
I
Very
mean,
nice
your
of you.
voice is so wonderful. And I mean, we would miss it, but obviously
But
you
then
make
that's very nice of you.
beautiful.
No.
Yeah.
I hear
Yeah.
you. I
We
guess
would
that
definitely.
would have been the toughest part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like people would be so worried about me more than I'm someone who just like a situation happens, I find solutions. I'm just a solution oriented person, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I'd get really upset, but I move quickly through life and just whatever comes, I try to, you know what I mean? And I feel like I was making the plan to survive this without a voice. And I had been on that frame of mind because I didn't think the voices come back. They weren't very, so I started that process and I was like, I'm going to score films now. You know what I mean? And it's going to be great
No.
because I can't tell the director what I think. So it's perfect.
Oh my gosh. Do you want to do more film composing?
Yeah, that's my dream. I think that's the most
Okay.
fun. I think it's the most fun musically in a sense but I do think that's one thing you do get particularly better with age. I think older composer is better just because you just have less to say. So you just say what needs to be said. And the more you do that in film score in general, the better off your score is to some degree. So I feel like that kind of wisdom, which may not pay off for pop hits, like, when you're 18, 19, you have too much to say and you have to say it before you explode, is conducive for that. And I think that as you get older, one of the talents you have is when you're a producer or in a film score role, you're like, don't waste your time saying that. Let me tell you, I've said it and it's useless. And it's really helpful for composing for a film. I think John Williams started incredibly late. Hans Zimmer, these are later on in their careers. I think it's a later on in your career kind of job.
Well, and it's also, both a composer and a music supervisor were helping deliver someone else's vision, someone else's story. So you're really only one element of many,
Yeah. So it's better to have your ego in line. Like I think
Agreed.
I feel like my ego is a much better version for film scoring than it would have been in my 20s. I think I would have taken too much place.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, a big part of this job is the politics of it too, which you see, because you're like, my opinion doesn't matter right now.
I do think the last 5-6 years, I've been studying on the sideline for a lot better sound design and electronics. So I think my signature will be the expertise of orchestration and the expertise of left field electronics when I start to score, which I can't really use in my albums because my voice doesn't sit on it that well. So I have an album coming out after this record called Film Scores for No One, where it will be all instrumental music.
I love it.
And
But watch,
that one,
you'll watch.
yeah,
You'll be
and
wrong, and we will use it.
Yes.
No, I think it was just, I think that people, because of Thibaut the Home or Je te laisserai des mots, people just can't assume there's certain things I can and can't do. But when it comes to dark and crazy and big orchestrations, I'm pretty good at it. Funny enough, even though the Thibaut the Home overshadows that. So I feel like the Film Scores for No One project will be just something that I do, especially for me, but especially for people who want to hire me as scoring, so they understand actually the different timbres I actually can use.
I think that's smart and that's great. Just doing it because it's the muscle that you want to exercise right now.
It's also very fun.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. You've kind of answered you love your composers, and you've told us some classical composers, but we like to ask, what are your favorite sad songs? I mean, I know you've sort of probably mentioned some, but do you have any that are just?
I mean, Bridge on the Troubled Water saved me once. And that's everybody had when some people tell me they're like, "Oh, Thibaut the Home saved me." It was kind of late in my life too. I was just really having. I just can't. It was one of the worst days ever. And then it was really weird. I was driving and I started crossing the bridge and the damn song came on.
Wow.
And I just can't tell you at that moment how dark it was at that moment. And I was just driving the song. I'm on a fucking bridge. I'm like, am I on a bridge? And this fucking song's coming on. Like, what are the fucking odds of that nonsense? Paul Simon did a lot. And there's another song carried me a lot from his, would be Only Living Boy in New York. I used to sing, I used to listen to it every time I go on stage. I think Nick Drake would have played a big part of my life, in terms of those type of singers. I think I listened to a lot of Radiohead when I was younger and Pink Floyd when I was younger. It's sad songs. I don't know. There's so many different. I just so many different variations of that. But
back to Bridge Over Troubled Water for a second.
Enya.
How did it? Ooh, I used to play. I
You know
used to
your
play
dark
Enya on
secrets?
piano when I was
Yeah.
growing up because I didn't
Yeah.
want to play like
Nobody
regular
wants to
stuff.
say
I
it,
wanted
but
to
let's
play.
say
Yeah.
it. We all loved Enya.
Enya's beautiful. Yeah,
I
no,
know that's the
Enya's
thing. It's so beautiful that you just don't want to tell anybody because it's
Well,
so
it's
Yeah.
like
also that second album. Like I felt like Orinoco
Watermark.
Flow. I was like, no, thank you. But the next album, I was like, yes, please.
Yeah, that
more of
Watermark
this.
album. Yeah, it's like it's
Yeah.
so that's like one of those like things you don't want to tell everybody.
Totally.
But I feel like I feel like everyone does though. Like
No, it's
let's
true, of course.
bring back Enya.
Before we wrap, when you say Bridge Over Troubled Water saved you, I'm just curious, like, what was the feeling? Like, I know sometimes we listen to a song and it calms you and that's why it saves you, or did it give you a release and that's why it saved you, or it made you think? I'm just curious.
Nothing to save me.
But how?
I just don't think that day it's just not working out, you know?
Mm-hmm.
In
But
a
so
way
the
that
song made you feel better?
it just allowed me to push off the bottom in a way that I'm not entirely sure many things at that moment would have had the similar impact. You know, like we hit the bottom and you can like cut your toe on the bottom and you just get a little shove off the bottom to start the
Mhm.
momentum the other way. I would say that would have done that.
Mm.
Did it come on the radio at that time?
Yes, it's super
Wow.
random.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was super random. That's why I'm like, wow, I love those kind of random. I love random moments.
Yeah.
Totally.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
That's awesome.
there was a team of light helping you or something maybe.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just felt like
Yeah.
like someone came and gave me a little push to get me through that day. You know, like that's
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
that
amazing.
happens in life. Life is life.
That's right.
Life is life, people.
That's right.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, hot take from Patrick. Well, this was wonderful and fun, and we thank you so much for joining us.
I'm glad we
and-
could reconnect. It was
I
really fun to see you guys
know.
again. Right on.
I know, right? And it's been so fun to watch your career over the years, and
Oh, thank you.
you continually evolve and put out really wonderful stuff, and we can't wait to hear the new stuff. So
It should come out in the next year. I just
Okay.
don't know exactly when because there's 2 songs I have to finish that I'm waiting for the guests to have a chance.
Well, thanks so much for being here. And
No, thank you for inviting me. I love talking shit. This is great.
no,
this is
great.
awesome.
Thank you for joining us today on Sad Song Queens, because you always need a good cry.
Thank you to Patrick Watson, Philip France, Stella Page, Dominic Smith, Jason Swinsko, Olivier Sirois, Gita Seaton. Our friends at Domino, Secret City, and Third Side Music. Special production thanks to Keahu Kahuanui, Miles Bergsma, Wyatt Rouse, Jessica Griffin, and our researchers Emily Cartham and Sylvia Molthrop.
Theme song by Weezer, All My Favorite Songs, and outro music by Wyatt Rouse.
Hi, it's Lindsay from the Sad Song Queens podcast. You may have heard us allude to Rob or thank Rob Seals in the Songwriting School of Los Angeles at the end of our podcast. He has been so kind to let us record in his studio, and the Songwriting School is an awesome place. If you want to learn how to songwrite, record, or even information how to release or sync your song, there's a class for that.
The Songwriting School of Los Angeles is devoted to the artistry and industry of songs. To learn more, go to thesongwritingschool.com, where you can learn more or enroll in classes.